Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Ken Byrne, and he is the founder at RedSky Europe. RedSky Europe is a 3PL fulfillment center, fulfillment partner based in Ireland. And I spent some time in Ireland maybe 2 years ago and loved it there, but didn't get to dive too much into the 3PL space in Ireland. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We're also going to talk a little bit about how Ken has developed Red Sky over the years, what really was the catalyst for him to start that, and also how they are expanding into international beauty brands and helping them to get a more global reach as well. And we'll do some tips on kind of when is the right time to do that, and also what do you need to do that as well. So, Ken, welcome to the show. How are you?
Great. Thanks, Kevin, and great to be here.
Yes, absolutely. Happy to get you on. I know that you're a listener of the show. You told me, and happy that we could connect over the last couple months here. And certainly, happy to get you on the show and learn about this because I think when we think about 3PLs, we don't necessarily always think about Ireland. So we're happy to get you on representing the great country of Ireland here as well. So tell us a little bit about Red Sky, and maybe tell us too, why did you end up starting Red Sky as the founder?
Yeah, great. I started Red Sky in 2019. I had a number of e-commerce brands myself, selling over to your part of the world. So we used to sell
Okay.
into North America, US and Canada, and Japan. And from traveling over to the US, I got exposed to the 3PLs over there, the mentality around them, the advancements in technology, the way they use technology to support it. And I just felt we didn't have anything like that over here. And with the growth of e-commerce in Europe, I felt it was an opportunity to assist international brands to come into Europe, but with that US mentality around 3PL services and really understanding brands, understanding what they really need from both a tech element and a services element in a 3PL partner.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and I think it's very interesting because I hear right so many 3PLs. That's kind of the way they start, right? They have their own brands at first, their e-commerce brands. So tell us a little bit about because a lot of the stories I've heard that are similar is the e-commerce brand was just like unhappy with their fulfillment partner in a sense. But I guess tell us a little bit about how did you kind of evolve your business from I guess maybe the first question would be, I mean, do you still have some of those e-commerce brands, or is it all just strictly the 3PL business now?
Yeah, it's all strictly a 3PL business. The
Okay.
the the sector we were in e-commerce, we were dealing with a lot of artisan Irish producers, and it was really getting them exposed in the US and creating good supply chain direct to consumer, selling a lot of Irish products. And we probably felt as we grew that the supply wasn't consistent enough and some of them couldn't handle the volumes that we required. We just saw that as an exposure. And a couple of the suppliers we had, they retired, the founder retired, and the business closed because didn't have a son. And we just felt a little bit exposed, and we wanted a business that we could scale. I've had a number of startups, and having a business that you can scale is would be always one of my priorities. I just felt with the 3PL sector that it's a very scalable business that you can grow quite big.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that, we've seen certainly a surge in 3PL businesses as well as e-commerce has exploded across the world, right? And certainly driving a lot of that. So tell us about I mean, kind of the 3PL space and I guess the fulfillment market just in general in Ireland itself.
Yeah, it's a very different market than the US and the 3PL space here. A lot of companies that are in the 3PL space here, they may have started off as packaging or a printing company or a haulage and
Mm.
freight company, and they moved into this. Where when we set up Red Sky, it was specifically for e-commerce. So there's a little bit probably here still a little bit of lack of understanding of really the requirements of a brand and
Mm,
in how a 3PL partner, how important it is from an infrastructural point of view, supporting their growth. And coming from an e-commerce background, of course, it gives you a complete understanding what you as a brand require in a partner. So it's probably a little immature here towards the States, most definitely, but it is picking up because even though we have a small country here, Ireland, with 5 million people, the e-commerce market here is very, very strong and really growing uh, on a yearly basis, as is across Europe.
mm. Yeah, interesting. And a smaller country or a smaller population certainly than like the U.S. as a country, for example. But do you only fulfill and ship within Ireland, or do you go beyond Ireland to Europe as well? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, no, we ship globally. We have a couple of clients that only sell into the US. Actually, we dispatch into the
Mm,
US on a daily basis. But most of our clients is Europe and the UK, where we dispatch on a daily basis. So right across the 27 countries in the EU and into the UK as well.
Interesting, interesting. And have you seen? I'm curious. You mentioned you have a couple companies that go direct to the U.S. on a daily basis. I mean, have you seen any differences or shifts in the market due to some of the tariff stuff going on and all those different things?
Yeah, one company we have, or a client we have in particular, I suppose it was the uncertainty. So they would
Mm,
move massive volumes around the peak period, and of course, with e-commerce, to be successful, you need to have inventory, and that costs money. And
sure.
because all of their sales are into the US, they were probably a little bit later than traditionally they would be on getting us an inventory, and it probably affected their sales. But
Mm,
a few months ago, we had conversations with them, and they weren't sure was it safe to invest in huge amounts of inventory, not knowing what way the tariffs would be or the way the cross border would be into the States. So it was really, I think some companies found it difficult to plan because it was so changing, and probably is still a little bit. And
mm.
it's hard to plan with that uncertainty there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's a lot of what I've heard too. Is just do is now the right time to get inventory? Do we wait to get inventory, right? Like
Yeah.
how do we when do we actually like pull the trigger on something like that? I think it's really interesting to figure out from a planning perspective. I don't envy anybody that's trying to plan their inventory in the last year, right? So now tell us a little bit about your operations. I mean, how many facilities do you have over there? What does kind of the your tech stack look like? What do your operations look like over there in Ireland?
Yeah, so we currently have two facilities, and we've a third opening in March. We've about 80 full-time employees, and then
Mhm,
we bring in seasonal employees as well. And we use American WMS Ship Hero.
mm,
So we would have brought Ship Hero in the very early days. Now we had to do some development on our side on that with integrations into couriers here and
sure.
little issues like we use centimeters here and you guys use inches and pounds and kilograms and things.
Yeah,
Um, but again, we just wanted a system that gave the clients the access into inventory, reporting, dashboards, ability to be able to place orders, and all of our clients absolutely love it. And we've developed on from that of having clients from the US that would be using Ship Hero with a 3PL in the US and using us here. So that was
mm,
we done a lot of work with the founders around Ship Hero, around being able to do that, having one system, but clients could use multiple 3PLs under different ownership, but have one centralized dashboard and WMS, and that's been really successful. But as I say, like Ship Hero, the guys are constantly developing that and reacting to the market, and we've had a number of years now, probably since we've pretty much been open, and it's been,
mm,
yeah, a
okay.
great system. As I say, a little bit challenging at first because it wasn't as compatible with Europe. So we would have done a lot of the direct integrations with couriers with Chip Hero. But yeah, it's super system. You couldn't fault it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's really interesting to hear. And you mentioned something there about the, I mean, I guess kind of like a little nuance, right? Is the units of measure, right? Centimeters versus inches. You mentioned in there. I mean, how do you how do you kind of navigate that? And is there like another layer to your processes that you have to add, especially for like some of the brands that you said are, you're shipping over to the US on a daily basis? I mean, does that create like another level of complexity, or is there something else that needs to happen in order to navigate some of those conversions?
Yeah, it's really because I suppose they're just units of measure. So it was just a bit of development on the Ship Hero platform and a little bit of development with our integrations into our couriers. But that didn't cause real issues. What would have been probably bigger issues at the time with Brexit, with the UK, and simply not being able to get shipping labels
Mm.
because of complexities on that. I remember a common theme in our office for about 2 months was people saying, "I wish I could just get a DHL label." And when we got that, it was
Yeah.
like celebrations, and that was probably a bigger disruption.
Yeah, interesting, interesting. And then so, how did you? I mean, that's interesting because to be honest, I didn't really know about that during the Brexit situation, that it was challenging to get certain shipping labels. So tell us a little bit about that. How did you kind of navigate that at the time?
Yeah, that a lot of that was with the couriers themselves, because over here we had Brexit where the UK now is an international country to Europe, even though
Mhm.
it's a 35-minute flight from Ireland. So I don't believe a lot of the big companies, and it was really surprising here how unprepared a lot of the bigger companies and a lot of the couriers, um, the cross border into the UK, they were lacking infrastructure to be able to handle all goods that now were had customs rate where up till that they never had. And I think even with the bigger companies was just they didn't they underestimated how the changes that were needed with that, and their
Mm.
technology just didn't support it. So it was really we done everything we could do, but it was really on the courier side. Now a few of them were really on top of it, and it made a huge difference. But as I say, it's when you have a country that you have 27 countries shipping into it on a daily basis, they're shipping out to 27 countries and it's free flowing. And literally overnight now, everything has customs tariffs on it and has to be processed and has to be logged. I don't think anyone understood how massive that was, and it took a couple of years, and they're probably still not 100% on top of it.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's fascinating, right, to see these kind of I guess trade policies and political, economical shifts throughout the world, and then the rippling effects that they have on the supply chain in general. And how how do we kind of navigate that to be able to get things to people that want them, right? To be able to do that. So very interesting there. So you mentioned that your WMS is Ship Hero, and I'm curious, like, have you looked at any additional technologies, like in terms of AI or robotics or automation? Is that been considered by you? Are you utilizing any now? How do you look at some of these kind of advanced technologies that we're seeing entering the warehouse operations?
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. So Ship Hero themselves have a huge focus on AI, and I see they're releasing new
Sure. Yeah.
features the whole time, and really smart and working well. Um, with our new facilities, we've won a really large apparel client, and
Mm.
they're at the level that humans just could not process the level of order. So we're looking at automation, but as we got into this was really interesting, even on automation, certain types of e-commerce brands, and in certain sectors, automation suits at different sides of it. And what I mean is, we have a number of cosmetic clients, and when you're looking at very small, high volume, but multiple items in an order, we find that the automation at the front end of that is where you need it. So, likes of shelves being brought to people, and you're picking multiple
Okay.
orders,
Yeah.
and but with apparel that doesn't work at all. You need the automation at the other end of it, at the packing end of it, where
Mm,
you can have something automatic polybag machines that will pack like 1,200 orders an hour and put a label on them. So the picking is actually the easier end with apparel, it's pure down to size, the amount of units you're probably going to have in an order. So we've done probably the last year we've done a lot of work on automation, so it's been a huge education for us. But
mm,
it's fascinating to see that when you think of automation, you really need to think of the categories you service and how is the automation suited to that categories. I know a couple of warehouses here in Ireland that do apparel, and they have automation for picking, and
mhm.
their personnel can pick faster than the automation, these robotic systems.
Really
But I know
interesting.
at the packing end of it is where it slows down when you're into very high volume and you're down to orders per minute and packs per minute. It's amazing where the automation, you really need to look at it. But then again, this is where 3PLs sometimes it can be a struggle if you've multiple clients in multiple
Yeah.
sectors with multiple types of profiles of orders, profiles of products. You're always thinking, what can I bring in here that suits every anomaly? Where sometimes if you have some larger clients and you single them out and you look at automation just around them, it's a lot easier. But then with automation, it's all down to volume as well to make it a returning or bringing in that kind of infrastructure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and really, really great point there about the profile of the product and where the automation makes sense versus where it doesn't. And obviously, a great example that you said there, where somebody that they're doing on the picking side, and the humans picking faster than the automation, right? So it's kind of like, okay, well, does this the right application actually, right? It raises that question in there. So you mentioned you've done a lot of kind of research and look at automation in the last year or so. Have you implemented any automation at all yet, or are you
Yeah,
kind of looking to?
yeah, we have a new system coming into, and I was actually over in the UK last Thursday,
Okay.
looking at various sites, and we were looking at 3PLs that service clients that only do pillows, down to clients that do little small items, and another company, and they do 45,000 orders a day
Mm,
of apparel and sportswear and screen printing, and it's great way to see where the automation fits in. But what you do see, it's definitely certain profiles of types of clients automation suits in certain ways, and then in other ways automation doesn't work at all. So it really does come down to the profile of the client and size orders they're doing, the cost of the automation versus what you're pulling in on a margin on the customer.
mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think there's, so many different factors there. And now within the market, I mean, there's just so many different options as well, right? To choose from. I'm sure I'm sure you're seeing as you're shopping
Yeah,
around, right? It's like, we have this use case, but then there's like, well, there's 10 companies that like service this type of use case, right? Like, how do we decipher that? So I'm curious what, as you've gone through that process and you're trying to maybe narrow down some options. What are some of the maybe the biggest challenges that you've seen in trying to navigate that?
specifically around the automation, Kevin, is it?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was number one. I suppose how what process do you look? So, for example, a machine that can polybag 1,200
Sure.
hoodies per hour. does that fit in with your automation, with your technology, with your processes for picking orders, with the profile of orders? If there's lots of automation out there, if you have one standardized product and you only ever have one in an order and the size of the product never changes, there's multiple companies that would say we can bag all day long, we can automate that. When you start looking at multi items, different sizes, being able to adjust to different types of products, it's really your processes that work with the automation, because while it sounds really obvious, the automation needs to make your life better, but you
Yeah.
can see sometimes it's actually added complexities to 3PLs, and I'd say they brought in extra complexities that they didn't need. They have to have workarounds with technology. They end up bringing in middleware, another level of middleware, and then even the maintenance on them. And the automation, what I would have seen is there was certain automation in 3PLs that for an hour or two a day it was working, and they just couldn't get it to work for the other 8 or 10 hours a day. They didn't have the profile, and really what it's doing in a couple of hours couldn't justify it. So it's a tricky enough one, but I suppose with any 3PL, if you have a couple of really large clients,
Mhm.
you can make processes just for clients. So, for example, our new facilities, part of that facility is just for one client. We're putting in mezzanine floors just for that client. Conveyors, it'll be only for that client. The automation will only be for that client. But then this client's at such a huge volume of orders and consistent throughout the year. There is an upturn in peak, but for the most of the year, very consistent monthly high volume orders. So for us, when we do our figures and that, it justifies bringing in automation just for that client. Now, what we might see, we might start pushing other clients in towards that as well, but from an initial stage, and as I say, that can be hard, especially for early stage 3PLs, where you have a lot of early stage brands, a lot of small clients, huge nuances in size of products, orders. It's hard to get a uniform system that suits so many different anomalies, and that's always a challenge.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a great point there because I think if you look at the market in terms of like automation and robotics, there's so much marketing out there like that, the average person might think like, oh, every warehouse has robots inside of it, right? And that's very far from the case. The percentage is still very low. But that's
Yeah.
one of the big challenges, right? Is so many warehouses are multi-client, right? And like, how do you find a solution that's going to fit that? So it's great that, obviously, congratulations that you have a client large enough that can take over one entire building, right? I think that's kind of the pinnacle for a 3PL, right? Is to be able to have that client, dedicated client facility, and certainly that allows you to test something. So it's so very interesting here, kind of your thought process and how you're navigating around these automation solutions and figuring out where it makes sense, who it makes sense for, and how to actually make sure you get that return, and like you said, make sure that it actually makes your life better, right? Instead of adding additional complexity. So very good there. So you're also starting to focus on more US kind of expansion for the brands you work with, and specifically around beauty brands in particular. So tell us a little bit about what does that mean, and what was kind of the maybe indicating factor catalyst there for you to start to focus on this a little more going into this year.
Yeah, a really good question. So we have a number of beauty clients here. That's something we got very good at over the years, and from demand from existing clients for services such as kitting and laser engraving, we would have brought a lot of extra services in for these clients. They were upselling to their customers. We just wanted to be able to support them on that. And a couple of things we done. We took a really good look at the market for somebody coming into Europe. Europe can be quite complex because you have 27 countries here. The
Sure.
UK, of course, going to be a big target. And that's actually even separate than Europe. It's not even part of Europe. So you have different languages, cultures, different buying habits, different way that the markets consume information. So there's a lot of complexity, a lot of regulatory complexity. Then you have customs duties, freight. So what we worked on through 2025 was trying to put a service offering together that clients that want to go international don't have to have five different vendors to pull everything together, to kind of pull everything together themselves. So we would have partnerships with freight companies so we can pick up inventory anywhere in the world and bring it into us, customs cleared, make it a really door to door service. Obviously, we do all the 3PL services with storage, dispatch right across Europe and globally if they need, and your integrations and everything. We also manage sales tax, so we have a VAT management service. So, for example, where when you sell in Europe, when you take money off a European,
Mhm.
you've collected sales tax, and that needs to be remitted to the various tax authorities. We manage that, manage the filings, and even into the
Okay.
UK. So we would have worked with a couple of couriers into the UK where when one of our clients is sending products into the UK, the VAT is actually deferred through the courier. We've it set up with the courier to defer it, and then the client only has to do a normal filing. Outside of that, what happens is the courier charges you VAT, and then when it's delivered to the customer, they're also charged VAT. So if a customer buys a T-shirt, they end up getting a nasty letter saying that your T-shirt will be delivered when you pay the 15 euros in taxes on this. So we've navigated
Mm.
around that with couriers, and we manage we're tax agents for Europe and for the UK. Um, but a service we've added this year, late last year with a company is around compliance and regulatory compliance,
Okay.
specifically for the beauty sector and responsible person services. So for an international beauty company that's not registered in Europe, they have to have what's called a responsible person, where it's somebody based in Europe, a European, that is essentially responsible for the products and for that company and all of their activities in Europe. And it's really if there was issues with the quality of products or anything like that, that the European authorities have a European to go after instead of an international company. But also cosmetic compliance for ingredients, for labeling. So we offer services now that covers the full 360. Because of what we found, especially with beauty brands in that particular sector, they're generally very good at developing products. It's what they're and their brand, but they're also good at marketing and getting in front of customers. So
Mm.
we felt if we were able to offer all the other services through one vendor here in Red Sky, it'd be really compelling offering. So we've a number of companies at the moment from the US that are engaging with us, and we're going through the process with them. Because one of the things here in Europe, the whole beauty sector is growing like nuts over here. So all the US beauty brands, they know Europe is a supermarket for them. It's probably not quite as aggressive as the US. Um, and we I would see that Europe, for the most part, would be what I'd consider an early adopter market. They will try new things. They're open to new brands. We're in the e-commerce business. I found that certain markets they just don't change. This is the way they buy, and that's it. Here, there's a really growing young population. So K beauty, the Korean beauty sector, is growing,
Mhm.
really growing big over here. But the whole makeup, hair care, and wellness supplements.
Sure.
It's huge growth in Europe, but as I say, you need good solid infrastructure. So and again, that comes with commitment to have inventory over here. And as you can imagine, going through regulatory compliance can be expensive enough. But really, having strong infrastructure here, there's a phenomenal market and huge opportunities that American brands would be really adapt at capitalizing on.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the beauty surge in general has just been pretty wild to see, what some some people have been able to build up from, just I mean, a lot of, obviously like influencers and celebrities getting into it and having their own cosmetic lines and things of that nature. It's pretty fascinating to see. I mean, I myself, I don't use anything fancy. I'm just a regular Head and Shoulders guy, from a that's about the extent of it. But I think it's really, really interesting to see. And obviously, you mentioned there's a huge opportunity for potential growth in the European market as well. So, for those beauty brands, as they're building up, right, and they're scaling, say that they've, had developed a presence in like the US market, for example, and now they're thinking, okay, it's time to, try and explore other markets, right? How can we get into the European market, for example? How do you, advise them to kind of, I guess, like, when is the right time to do that? Like, because I imagine there's a time where like, it's a little too early, right, to do that. But when is like the right time to do that? And how do you advise brands like when they should start to make that move and start to penetrate that additional market?
Yeah, yeah, really interesting question. What we have found in our experience from talking to numerous brands from the US is generally what we have found is they have felt there are certain markets that would be successful for them. So some of them come into us and they would say, "Well, we believe that the UK and maybe Germany or the UK, maybe France or maybe even Ireland." And because a lot of them are so social media savvy and base so much of their business, the social media has gone really global now. So they tend to see regions that are attracted to. So a lot of them come in and they're pretty sure. Europe really coming into it, you need to pick a market or two and really understand the market. It's hard to get blanket coverage here, because people in Germany purchase very different than people in France and Italy. It might be all about the quality of the products, where in France it might be the cost of the products. Uh, Germany, it might be the size of the products or how long they'll last. So the markets are very different here. But what we find, a lot of them will push to get into some element of retail just to get a presence and then build their online on the back of that, because the retail does get in front of eyes and start to build the online then on the back of that. So have centralized inventory. And there are a lot of specialized beauty consultants here in Europe that have access into retail. And of course, all the retail stores here now, while beauty is growing so much, they're looking at bringing in new brands and being fresh the whole time. So there's is good market access here, and there is good access into retail, and then helping that to get build your brand and funneling into your direct to consumer then on the e-commerce is what we see with a lot of them. Now I know a lot of these Korean brands would consider themselves e-commerce first, so they
Sure.
only want to do retail as a need to do, but they feel it's the e-commerce with the social media where they feel they excel. But definitely having some element of retail exposure is probably a requirement if you really want to target a market.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting to hear because, I think like in the US side, right? We've seen more like, okay, well, this brand is, growing online, like as you mentioned, like social media. They've got the presence. They started as digitally native, really, and then like because they've gotten that attention, that attraction, now like they can get into a retailer, right? But you're saying like kind of in the European market, like more of a first step is to get into the retailer to get that attention and those eyes that will then drive more online shopping and orders, which I think is pretty interesting to hear that, and interesting to hear too that it's there's a lot of accessibility to get into those retail outlets, which I think, if you're saying that the market is has a large opportunity for that, I think the retailers probably are seeing that too, right? To like, okay, let's get these beauty brands in here because people are looking for different type of brands and differentiators and things like that. So very interesting to hear about that. Now tell us a little bit about kind of like, we're recording this now, almost like at the end of January 2026, right? I mean, what are you seeing in kind of the fulfillment landscape and the 3PL market, for the remainder of this year, maybe heading into 2027? How do you kind of view the market and what's happening?
Yeah, a couple of things I would have seen over the last number of years here.
Mm,
So traditionally, if we were talking to an international brand, they'll say like, why would they even consider Ireland? Most of them have their granny is from Ireland, but that's the only the only win, like
sure.
why you'd use Ireland from an emotional side, that they
Yeah.
would have always said, would you not use the Netherlands? Why would you consider Ireland? So
Mhm,
a couple of things here in the last couple of years that we would have seen is the courier networks have got very, very strong here.
mm,
Delivery times, rates have got very strong, good competition in the market. They've all really invested heavily in tech to support the last mile delivery, to the handover delivery, and also from the other side as well. And we have UPS just coming in here in Ireland, really shaking up the market.
mm,
So that's gone very. So I think it's changed the narrative a little bit that if you're an international brand, you can't consider anywhere but the Netherlands. We'd have a number of clients that have left Netherlands and came to us. Um, they just feel they get there wasn't a brand understanding there. They're not as cheap as it's perceived to be. But what we would, if we have a client coming into us and they feel their only market is Germany, we'll say, well, you'll have to be domestic in Germany. Why would you consider Ireland if you're only selling in Germany? But we would compete with any country if you're looking for a wider coverage, and especially into the UK. But as I say, the whole e-commerce sector is really shaking up here and changing faster than it probably ever has in Europe. Europe was always slow enough to move, slow enough to change. But
mm.
here, the I think the consumers are getting a little bit more demanding. So the brands that are upping their delivery, upping their unboxing experience, bringing out new products are definitely winning over here. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, yeah, interesting, and really interesting to hear kind of that growth and how things are shifting, and obviously very interesting too to hear that Ireland is such a viable option, and the UPS entrance as well. Very curious to see how that continues to evolve and what happens here in the future. But it was great to talk to you today, Ken, and really appreciate you bringing your insights to the show and telling us all about the Irish market over there, as well as kind of what's happening internationally, and giving us some advice on how to expand around that, and how to look at some automation solutions too for 3PLs out there as well. So really appreciate you coming on. If people are interested in learning more about Red Sky or getting in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can contact us directly through the website. RedSkyEurope.com is probably one of the easiest ways, and there's contact forms and everything on that.
All right, fantastic. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well as in the show notes here. So, Ken, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
Yeah, great speaking with you.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video here on our YouTube channel, the New Warehouse Podcast. And I appreciate you tuning in. If you liked what you saw, make sure you subscribe to our channel. And if you like this video in particular, make sure you like it as well. And if you want to get this great t-shirt that you see in the video behind me, Warehouses Are Sexy, head to warehousesaresexy.com and get your own.